During the 2017 United Nations Convention, Donald Trump famously proclaimed to the world, "The problem is not that socialism has been poorly implemented, but that socialism has been faithfully implemented. From the Soviet Union to Cuba to Venezuela, wherever true socialism or communism has been adopted, it has delivered anguish and devastation and failure." Like a football being thrown around in a football game, the word socialism is vigorously and violently fought over by opposing political parties. Welcome to Carter Centrist Call. My name is Vince Carter, and today we're going to discuss the origins of socialism, which is called classical Marxism. And hopefully we can find some clarity on such a controversial topic. But before I start receiving accusations of being a communist or a Marxist or a member of Antifa for creating this series, I want to make my political bias clear. I am a registered independent. I despise the two-party system. And economically, I'm a social democrat. As a social democrat, I believe that capitalism is the single best form of economics, especially when it comes to innovation, but it isn't perfect. I believe that we should combine very specific socialist policies and ideas within a capitalist framework in order to create an economy that truly benefits the average American. But we'll talk way more about that topic in a future video. Socialism is an umbrella term used to describe a wide variety of ideas, similar to how the word salad describes everything from a chicken buffalo salad to a Greek salad. They are both salads, but they also have very distinct flavors. In the year of 1818, in the city of Trier, Germany, a man who would forever change the world, for better or worse, was born. Karl Marx was a German philosopher, economist, and most significantly, a socialist revolutionary. After obtaining his PhD in philosophy from the University of Vienna, Marx went on a personal crusade in an attempt to thoroughly understand how capitalism works and to uncover what were the consequences of capitalism on society. In the year of 1849, Marx moved to London to observe the inner workings of the world's greatest capitalist economy of the time. Marx would spend the next 20 years speaking to workers, visiting factories, reading medical reports, and detailing every aspect of Britain's industrial society before finally publishing his results in his book Das Kapital. Marx had observed the working class, which he called the proletariat, routinely being exploited by the ultra-wealthy class, which he labeled as the bourgeoisie. Marx argued that the bourgeoisie was exploiting the proletariat through inhumane child labor, an unrelenting workday, and poverty wages negotiated by greed. Here are some examples quoted from Das Kapital. According to Mr. Charlton, the Nottingham County magistrate during 1860, workers were relentlessly worked for so many hours that a town in his county had to hold a public meeting to petition that the workday for men should be limited to 18 hours. They were fighting for a minimum working day of 18 fucking hours. Think about that the next time you work an 8-hour shift. According to the Daily Telegraph, dated 17 January 1860, children of 9 or 10 years are dragged from their squalid beds at 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning and are compelled to work for a bare substance until 10, 11, or 12 at night, their limbs wearing away, their frames dwindling, their faces whitening, and their humanity absolutely sinking into a stone-like torpor. This is utterly horrible to contemplate. Marx also argued that capitalism had other less obvious yet significantly adverse effects on society, such as the theory of alienation, commodity fetishism, and the coercive laws of competition. The theory of alienation is the tendency of workers to feel unattached to their work and isolated from society. During the 1860s, industrialization and machinery was beginning to take over the West. Think steel and oil factories. And it was rapidly replacing handicraft work, think textile manufacturing and carpentry. Whole products were no longer being created by a single master handicraft worker, but were instead being produced on an assembly line. Think Amazon or a food production factory in today's world. The pride and fulfillment people once felt in creating a commodity, which is any item of value, was being lost. As a result of being just another cog in a vast machine forced to work an unrelenting workday, workers began to feel isolated from society and dispassionate about life in general. We may not work 14-hour workdays anymore, but honestly ask yourself if you've ever felt like what Marx had described. I'm sure there are a lot of us out there. Commodity fetishism is the idea that under capitalism, people will begin to worship material goods, such as Gucci, Nike, and Louis Vuitton, while being oblivious to the conditions of the workers who created the product. For example, how often do we ask ourselves if somebody was forced through slave labor to extract the rare earth minerals in the new smartphone we just bought? Or if the brand name clothing we just purchased was created in an overseas sweatshop? Karl Marx was asking these questions back in the 1800s. Marx also argued that the free market isn't truly free. Capitalism is synonymous with innovation and competition. That is true. If your business doesn't innovate, it can't compete on the free market, and if your business isn't competitive, it will fail and you and your family will starve. This simple equation compels business owners to pay workers poverty wages, to cut corners if it will save the business a dime, and to ultimately prioritize profit over morality. Karl Marx labels this effect as the coercive laws of competition. In short, we have the freedom to choose between stepping on each other's throats or failing our loved ones. After observing all of the horrors of unchecked and unregulated capitalism, Karl Marx came to some very extreme conclusions based on noble ideas. Marx advocated for a political and economic system which emphasized noble ideas such as empathy, equity, and equality at its core. Some of today's most popular socialist policies can trace their roots back to Karl Marx, such as labor unions, free healthcare, and free college. Unfortunately, Karl Marx also believed that an equal and just society can only be achieved if the workers united together and waged class warfare against the ultra-wealthy. Marx was advocating for violent revolution. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, socialism is defined as a system or condition of society in which the means of production are owned and controlled by the state. This non-violent definition can trace a part of its roots back to Karl Marx, who once said that for the working people to be truly free, they must seize control of the means of production. Marx believed that if the very people who were being oppressed were the ones who controlled the state, they would create a just and prosperous society. This idea of the centralization of all political and economic power into the hands of the worker, which he labeled the proletariat, who is in complete control of the state, is a core principle in Marxism. And it distinguishes Marxism from later forms of socialism and communism that follow soon after. According to the Communist Manifesto, extreme ideas such as the abolition of private property, a dictatorship by the common worker, and the centralization of the economy into the hands of the state are all necessary steps to creating peace and prosperity. I know I just dropped the C word and everyone is freaking out, but don't worry, we'll cover communism in a future video. Marxism through an objective lens, we can see that Marx's critique of capitalism still holds true even to this day, but his solution for these problems fail under examination. Under a purely socialist government, society would absolutely flourish for some time, but in the long run, socialism has a very dangerous Achilles heel. You could elect 100 benevolent leaders who would do wonders for the nation, but eventually a leader with malicious intent would take charge, and if all forms of power have been concentrated within the hands of the state, the potential for anguish and devastation is truly unlimited. Let me leave you with these final questions. If Karl Marx was alive today, Would he fight for or against the brutal regimes that oppress their people and loudly proclaim to represent true socialism? And is it possible to create a socialist state that safeguards against authoritarianism? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and as always, the truth lies somewhere in the middle.